Welcome to yet another Rapid Trigger keyboard review. Seems like there's a new Hall effect Rapid Trigger keyboard popping up every week and it's been hard to keep up. But today we will take a look at one of newer editions, this time from Akko. What I have here is the MOD007 analog keyboard which supports Rapid Trigger, and today we will take a look at build quality, performance and price of what might be the best value keyboard on the market right now. Let's start with some specs. The MOD007 is a 10 keyless keyboard with a knob that can use two types of switches, Akko Cream Yellow or Kale Sakura Pink. Both are magnetic switches and you can decide which ones you want to use when ordering the keyboard. There's multiple colorways available and the one I have here is the Santorini colorway. The keyboard is hot swappable, so you can change the switches anytime you want. However, upon doing so you will need to recalibrate the board. I haven't done that yet, so I can't say how it works in reality, but it's definitely a really good thing to have. Since the keyboard is using widely available switches from Kale, you can also replace any damaged switch on your own. This is especially helpful after your warranty period is over. This is a gasket mount keyboard, so we get a top and bottom chassis. Below there is a switch plate. In this case, it's made of aluminum. Between the switch plate and PCB we get a thick layer of foam which helps with the sound dampening. At the bottom below the PCB there's another layer of foam. Overall, the keyboard sounds really nice. The keystrokes have a really pleasant sound to it. There's hardly anything to complain about in that regard. Maybe one thing that could be improved is the lubrication of the switches. I think it could use a bit more as some of them sound a bit scratchy. On my keyboard it's present on Ctrl, L and some other keys. Of course, it's also something you can improve yourself. Magnetic switch can be looped in a very similar way as classic mechanical switches. Now let's do a quick sound test. Like I said, I really like the sound profile of the keyboard straight out of the box and don't see any real reason to mod it. The build quality is also really good. Even though the keyboard is made mostly out of plastic, with the only exception being the metal switch plate, it feels really sturdy, doesn't flex or bend in any significant way and should serve you for the next couple of years. The keycaps are made of PBT with the legends on them printed with dye sublimation. My only regret here is that the legends aren't transparent, so the RGB doesn't shine through, but I guess it would be somewhat difficult with the type of font Akko has used. The keys also have a really nice texture to them and the font is very readable, even though it's stylized to match the theme of the keyboard. The graphics on the spacebar, shifts and enter are also really crisp with a lot of small details. At the bottom you will find two sets of feet which should help you set the angle of the keyboard to your liking. Apart from the keyboard, in the box you will also find a coiled cable, really nice addition to the set, a keycap puller and a switch puller which will make any modding of the keyboard really easy. Since this is a wireless keyboard supporting both 2.4 GHz connectivity and Bluetooth, we will also get a wireless dongle. The keyboard can work in three modes: Mac with the power and wireless connectivity on, default Windows with power off and Windows with power and wireless connectivity on. In order to change the mode of the keyboard, you need to take out the caps lock key and change the position of the switch. Top is Mac, middle is Windows with wireless off and bottom is Windows with wireless on. It's a bit inconvenient to do it that way, and hopefully in the next iteration Akko will find a more accessible way. The keyboard also has a knob which by default is used to change the volume of the system or change the brightness of the backlight. You can switch between those two by pressing the knob. In the beta update you can also use the knob to mute your system sound. Let's talk about performance now. After the recent update, the keyboard allows you to set actuation from 0.1 mm up to 4 mm. For Rapid Trigger the settings range from 0.1 up to 2.5 mm. As with any other keyboard, you need to be aware that 0.1 mm Rapid Trigger sensitivity is prone to accidental inputs and can cause weird keyboard behavior, so if you notice any of that happening, just decrease the sensitivity to 0.2, 0.3 mm and you should be fine. During gameplay, the keyboard was very responsive. It was easy to strafe left and right and quickly come to a stop when needed. The rapid trigger feature worked without any hiccups, no accidental inputs and no weird behavior even at lowest settings. I also tested whether there is any noticeable difference when using the keyboard in wireless mode, but honestly I couldn't notice any significant delay. The keyboard in everyday use, even in wireless mode, is very responsive, but obviously if you want lowest possible delay, I suggest using wired mode. I also tested how precise the rapid trigger settings on the keyboard are, and everything is in line with what Akko claims. After setting the sensitivity to 0.1mm, the keys react accordingly. Same if we change the settings to 0.2mm, the up and down stroke rapid trigger sensitivity changes to match the new settings. No issues here. Inspired by Optimum's performance test from his YouTube channel, and by the way, if you haven't seen it, go check out his rapid trigger keyboard tests, they're really good. I also did my own test using Sony RX100 Mark VII, which allows me to record videos at 500 frames per second. I then imported it to Resolve and counted the frames between the moment the button starts going up and the change on the screen. One frame in a 500 FPS video played back at 50 FPS is 2 milliseconds. If we now multiply the number of frames by 2, we get the delay between registered input and the time it takes to see the result on the screen. And in case of the Akko MOD007, the average time was 17 frames times 2 milliseconds, around 34 milliseconds. A really good result, just 12 milliseconds slower than the Wooting tested in the same way. Just have in mind that this way of testing also takes into account the latency of your whole system, PC and monitor included. I was also curious if switching to wireless mode causes any significant increase in input latency, and yes, there is a 10 millisecond difference, but that in my opinion is a minor trade-off for wireless use. Looks like Akko tuned their firmware really well. I'm kind of impressed. When it comes to configuration, you can only change the actuation rapid trigger using Akko's desktop app. There is no built-in menu that would allow you to change it without the software. Once you do it, however, the settings are stored on the keyboard, including your preferred RGB settings. Oh, and RGB settings can be changed without the software. There's a detailed manual that will help you do just that. When it comes to software, it's really basic, but in a good way. There you can change the actuation level, remap keys, change rapid trigger sensitivity, configure dynamic keystroke, which basically allows you to set different functions to one key that are based on the level of actuation or release of the trigger and so on. You can change the settings for all keys at once or individually, so this allows you to really fine-tune the keyboard to your needs. You can also choose a variety of different RGB settings to customize the look of your keyboard. This can also be changed using the built-in menu of the keyboard. After all the settings are done, you can just save them to your custom profile on the onboard memory. So overall, I think the Akko MOD007 is a great value for the price. You get a very well built analog keyboard with decent rapid trigger performance and wireless connectivity, which works surprisingly well even with rapid trigger feature enabled. You also get a coiled cable, switch and keycap pullers, and the ability to mod the keyboard to your liking. All that for around $150, much cheaper than big brand counterparts, especially if we take the wireless option into account. If you're after a decent keyboard, which you can also freely mod and connect to your laptop or MacBook via Bluetooth, this is definitely something to consider. And that's it in today's video. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Lazark, and I'll see you in the next one.